Hello, this is Robert from the editing room. What you're about to hear is the ramblings of a madman, so I apologize if at any point in this episode I just lose all self-control and just gush over this entire series and overcomplicate and over-explain everything. Anyways, just thought I'd throw a disclaimer out if you're like, geez, this guy lost all control. Enjoy. I forgot I was like to start one of these.
Woo. Woo. Woo, 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 woo.
Hello and welcome to The Witching Hour, a sister show to the main channel, the Salem Station podcast. Instead of covering specific horror movies, here on The Witching Hour, we cover entire horror franchises. This will be part 3, as part 1 was Friday the 13th, and part 2 was Halloween.
Been a fucking while, huh?
It's been a long time since we've done even a regular episode. But yeah, The Witching Hour.
School sucks.
I don't remember what episode it was on, but I said we were gonna cover like George Romero's zombie series. That's gonna be put on the back burner. That could be the next Witching Hour, maybe. I've only seen half of that series anyway, so.
Don't you lie to the audience. Oh my god, I have no idea what happened with my voice there.
But today's episode, as the title implies, we're doing the Saw series because there's a new Saw movie coming out, Spiral, from the Book of Saw. And I'm intrigued. I shall watch it when it eventually comes out. As of recording, it obviously hasn't been released, so this coverage of the franchise is gonna exclude that film. Maybe we could do something afterwards when it comes out. We could review the film, have a little episode on it. It's like a special series. Alex, what do you know about the Saw series? Anything you know. Go ahead, throw it at the table.
They use a saw at one point.
Yes, that is correct.
And there's this little Muppet-looking motherfucker that comes out on a tricycle. And he only comes out like in 1 or 2 movies, and somehow he's the icon for like the entire series.
I think he comes out in every movie.
Does he?
Yeah, he comes out in every movie.
I've watched most of the movies.
He's not used.
I've watched most of the movies.
Yeah, he's not used prominently as like, oh, Billy the Puppet's in every scene, but he'll show up every now and then, just like a little background character. On his little.
Is that what the fuck you said to me?
I was gonna say him on his bicycle.
You think it's funny?
I was familiar with the first film. Very familiar with the first film. Made by James Wan, the guy who did Insidious and The Conjuring. I had seen part 2 and part 3 a while back, but I wasn't as familiar with them upon rewatch. And not that long ago, I showed you and a couple of our friends basically the entire series, because I was like, hey, I want to rewatch the first film. I want to show you guys the first film, and then I eventually went down the rabbit hole that is the series. We'd all watched all 7 films. Then I took a break, and then I watched Jigsaw, and now I'm waiting for the 9th film. I guess we got to start from the beginning. Saw, the first film, 2004. Notorious for many reasons. Being cheap. I think we talked about this on an episode. I don't remember what episode it was. I think Terrifier, where we compared it to it because of how
I think so.
Dirt cheap Saw was, but they made a spectacular movie, dude. Saw's one of my favorite movies. It has now become one of my favorite franchises in horror. Like every movie. Well, no, that's a lie. I like most of the movies. There's a couple out here that I'll bash on, but I really like the first Saw film. Love it a lot. I would say it's in my top 10 horror films. We won't cover it on the main channel for like a good while. As I cover each movie, I'll even like mention my favorite.
I just found out one of the people that works on it. One of the girls or women, I guess. She has a TikTok photos of her working on the set, which is really cool.
Oh, that's pretty sick.
And like she talked about it, and she's like, "Oh yeah, no, I was like, she typically doesn't like horror, but like when
Hmm.
they're shooting the film, it's covered in like lights and there's people all around, and it all those effects like the grime and the losing your arm and like the whole atmosphere is created in post.
Hmm.
So
That.
they just slap a couple Snapchat filters on that bitch and call it a day.
Well, that's one way to make a film.
What we
But
would do.
I've seen interviews with Tobin Bell, the guy who does the voice for Jigsaw, John Kramer. Otherwise, I would love. There's a couple of people I would love to like. I've seen podcasts where like they interview people. I don't know if we would ever interview anyone, but if we were to, there's like a handful of people, maybe like 3 or 4 that I would love to. Uh, Tobin Bell's one of them. Jigsaw, dude, that guy's amazing. But there was an interview when Jigsaw came out, and I was watching it, and they were interviewing him. They were mentioning like, how do you play like this character? How do you are you like? Because he's like an older man, you know, he's like an older gentleman, and they were like baffled how like this old man could be like so creepy in the films. And I think it was like a news station. Um, and they were asking him, like, "Oh yeah, like I'm not particularly like a fan of torture porn or anything, but yeah,
He's
they're
just like,
cool
yeah,
films."
I don't even like the fucking the movies. I just do it for the money. Basically pulling a Harrison Ford.
I wouldn't say Harrison Ford. I wouldn't say to that degree. Harrison Ford genuinely hates being Han Solo. Somehow Bell doesn't hate it, but he's like, I'm not a fan of the torture porn aspect. But hey, I'll what the fans want. And that's another thing that Saw is very famous for. Um, it's often associated as the film that kicked off the torture porn subgenre of horror, which is self-explanatory. Just seeing people get tortured and mutilated and killed in gruesome ways. And I think the reason why is because before Saw came out, horror was like in a weird spot. It was post Scream, and a lot of films were trying to copy Scream. We did the biggest Scream copycat movie already. I Know What You Did Last Summer, and a
I
lot of
hate that
films were
movie.
like just yeah, I know. We should interview one of the people on that series and ask
No,
them.
I'd be
Did you
very
know?
mean.
Did you know that they're making a TV series?
They really
I
shouldn't. They really shouldn't.
That'd be
Of all the
amazing.
things that they could remake, they really shouldn't.
Ben Willis. I bought the book. I didn't know it was based. I don't think we ever mentioned it. It's based off of a novel, and I bought it because I need to compare this to the film. And so horror was in a weird spot. And horror was like this like jokey whodunit meta whatever. And
Scooby
then
Doo.
Saw comes basically, and then Saw comes out. And it's like, oh, this is gruesome. This isn't like what we've seen in the past few horror films. And a bunch of horror films followed suit. The most popular one, post Saw, kind of like how I Know What You Did Last Summer is to Scream. I'd say it's Hostel. I think a lot of people would agree that Hostel is the next biggest torture porn series. We'll never do it because it's.
I
I haven't seen it in a while,
I
but
don't know what you're talking about. I didn't know this was a thing. It's called Hostel.
yeah, it's Hostel.
What the fuck?
Look, look
I've
it up.
legitimately never heard of that.
Yeah, it's like it's like again, it's like how I Know What You Did Last Summer is to Scream. It's the same thing where I Know What You Did Last Summer is a whodunit murder mystery with teen drama,
And
but
really shitty.
Scream's
Really,
like
really shitty.
Hostel. I wouldn't say Hostel's cheap, but it's
It's
gruesome.
garbage, is
It's
what you're trying to
it's
say.
I didn't like it. It's made by Eli Roth, and we'll never
I
talk
don't
about
know
him on
who
the
that is.
podcast. But he's known for like having those like typical horror films where like all the characters are like shitty and they always end up in
Oh,
like
just like
horrific
B tier
scenarios,
movies.
and you're like,
The
"Ah,
movies
I
you
want
see
to root for the
on the side
characters."
on the gas station.
Something like that, yeah. And so that's what it is. it's a stereotypical, you know how like they always like say like, oh, Americans in foreign lands, they're always like obnoxious and whatever. This movie Hostel is about this group of Americans. I might be remembering it wrong. People are gonna be like, you're remembering that shit wrong. But I remember it's a group of Americans and they go to like Europe and they go to like clubs and parties and they're like, man, we're only here to bang chicks and like have the best of our time. And they're getting kicked out of bars and shit. Um, they end up getting captured for all their obnoxious
Hijinks.
shenanigans and yeah, hijinks ensue,
Shenanigans.
and they end up getting tortured. Unlike Saw though, where it's like a purpose, you know, Jigsaw's trying to teach them a lesson. This is more like there's this underground society that likes torturing people. We make bank off of this. You can. I don't know if they go like the whole dark web route with it. Maybe the later sequels do, but I was like, that's dark. And unlike Saw, Hostel seems like that can actually happen. You know, you always see cases of people disappearing in foreign lands, and I'm like, Hostel made me realize I better be nice when I go to other countries and not be a dick like these assholes. But other known uh torture porn series is the Collector series. It's the Collector. The Collection is the sequel, and I think there's a third film. Forgetting what it is, but
Oh yeah,
it
that
wa-
one
the
I do know.
collect. Yeah, the Collector was originally meant, I believe, to be a Jigsaw prequel, though, like the origins of Jigsaw. But then they realized that this film could stand on its own. I might be getting it wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what the Collector was. And so the Collector's it's its own little thing. I have yet to see the Collector. I hear it's very good though, but I have yet to watch it. But
I saw the ending explained on it.
that guy's amazing, dude. I love his videos. He introduced me to what was it called? Hell House. And I saw Hell House, and I was like,
Oh
"This
yeah,
is
same.
amazing. This is an
Did
amazing
you
film." I did.
did you watch all the Hell House?
No, I've only seen the first one. Only because I
Let's
looked
watch
up.
the rest of them.
Yeah, I'll probably watch them sometime. But I hate doing this, but I always look up reviews before films I see. I'm always like, is it good? Is it gonna be worth my time? And I shouldn't do that. I should go in not knowing. But I saw Hostel 2, not Hostel, damn it. What's it called? Hell House 2 is not as highly regarded as the first, and I'm like, that put me off. But I shouldn't have. That's my fault for having seen the review. But I'll definitely see Hell House 2 and 3.
I
But
think it's
love
worth
it.
a watch. I think
Yeah.
it's worth a watch.
Speaking of worth a watch, Saw to me is a worth.
No, don't watch it.
I watch it, guys. It's amazing.
No,
I love
don't.
this. Chef's kiss, dude. This is amazing. This I remember being like, I only like the original. I don't. It's one of those series where I'm like, I don't want to watch the sequels because I am worried that it'll ruin my perception of the first. A film series I do that with is The Omen. I love The Omen, and I refuse to watch any of the sequels. I have a collection. I have a collection of all the Omen movies sitting on my shelf, and
Do you
I'll
actually?
only yeah, and it's dude, the box art's amazing. You can look it up. It's spectacular. But I'll only ever pull that first film. I look at all the other films and I'm like, I'm sorry, I just no
So you
interest.
own them, but you refuse to watch them.
Yeah, I mean, I have the Critters box set as well, but am I ever really
Oh
gonna
yeah,
watch those?
I do as well.
I'm never gonna watch them, but I own them because yeah, I didn't know that Critters 2 was an Easter movie.
Is it?
And I hear that one is more, they embrace the stupidity of the franchise, and it's actually like worth. I don't know if I would say worth a watch, but
Worth is
I'm
it? It
intrigued.
may be worth your time. Maybe.
Maybe it's an asterisk. First Critters franchise we covered before, and it's not known for slam dunks. Let's just say that. I would say Saw is worth every. Most of the movies are worth slam dunks. I really love the first Saw film, and I was the same way with The Omen. I was like, I don't want to watch the sequels because I hear they get insane in terms of goriness and convoluted timelines. Correct in both statements, but I ended up loving it for both reasons. Does the franchise make sense? Probably not. I need a chronological timeline of the events that Jigsaw sets in motion because holy, it is a mess.
That
So Saw
bad?
One, it's It's convoluted, yes, but I like it. And I like it's like that meme of the guy with the red wire attached to like these like sticky notes all over the wall, and he's like, I need answers. That's how I am, but I like it. I like this convoluted mess. It keeps me thinking. Um, but the first Saw film is pretty simple. Pretty simple. It's these two guys in a room. They don't know how they ended up in this room, and over the course of the movie, secrets are revealed between them as to, hey, maybe this is why I'm in this room. Oh, well, this is maybe why I'm in this room, man. What connections do they have with each other? What connections do they have to potential Jigsaw killer, who's the I guess the face of the franchise? I actually Billy the Puppet's more the face of the franchise, which is, as you mentioned, ironic. I mean, he's a creepy looking. Did you know that they're not going to have Billy the Puppet on in the new movie? Kind of sad, but I'll give the new puppet the benefit of the doubt. He's like a pig looking marionette creepy thing. But I'll talk about Spiral in a bit. It's a pretty straightforward film with these two guys, and it's like an escape room, and it's the only film that's like that. Like obviously every film you have to escape these traps, but this one is like specifically like there's clues behind certain tiles in the room. Oh, there's like X marks the spot or whatever, and you got to check behind this, and you got to solve these puzzles and this riddles, and that's what made it so intriguing to me. I was like, oh damn, like this isn't like what I thought. Like people just
It's
hacking
like you
away
have
at
a chance.
limbs. Yeah, later sequels would do that, and I would still like it for that. But I was like, damn, like there's restraint in this film, but that restraint only comes from the lack of budget. There's it's still amazing though, and the twist reveal. So there's this dead body in the middle of the floor. By the way, spoilers. Before you listen to this, go watch Saw. It's amazing. Go watch Saw. Whatever negative connotations you have the series, just watch the first. Go on your merry way and watch it, and then come back. Spoilers. There's a dead body in the middle of the room. That is Jigsaw himself. And when they're like, it's revealed that this guy who the movie kind of sets up to be Jigsaw, his name is Zeb, and Zeb dies at the hands of one of the guys. His name's Adam, played by Lee Wanell, who was I think he's the screenwriter. Him and James Wan are credited for creating the series. Lee Wanell plays the actor Adam, and Lee Wanell is also responsible for numerous of the Insidious movies and the Invisible Man movie that came out that long ago. He directed that. He kills that, and it's like, oh, we got the Jigsaw killer. And then the body in the middle of the room stands up, and he's like, "Psych, motherfuckers, it's me."
He's just
And I
like,
remember
haha, it's me,
yeah, and
yo
they're
boy.
like, they're like, what? And that's something that they try to aim for in every movie, where it's like this twist ending you don't see coming. It's and that's what adds to the convoluted nature as the series just goes on, because it's like we got to add in a twist. This thing happened before, or this character's a
And
killer,
then
or
they try to
this and that,
integrate
and
into
it's
the
like,
story, and it just ends kind of in a mess eventually.
yeah, it
It's
doesn't.
like it gets to a point where, in order to understand the first movie, you have to watch the movie 2 movies ahead, and it's just kind of like, hmm.
Yeah, it's like,
But in order to understand those movies, you need to know what happened before, so you have to watch like the movies that came before it. But then there's twists that change. It eventually, like, how many Saw movies is that? There's a lot.
there's 9. Well, no,
There's
there's
9.
8.
Yeah.
There's 8 with the ninth one coming out.
Like past the 6th one is when it just starts getting to a point where it's almost impossible to understand unless you watch like an hour long breakdown on YouTube to break down every little thing.
Hey, and if you guys want me to, I'll do that hour
Oh my
long
fucking
breakdown.
god.
I will unravel the Saw series. I'll make a Saw timeline of events. Jigsaw's origins to Jigsaw's death to Jigsaw's apprentices and potential cult, maybe? Jiggy cult? But anyways, I'll get more into that later. So yeah, Jigsaw's the killer. That's the twist. And the iconic, I love this so much. Jigsaw gets up and he's like, y'all lost. Y'all buffoons didn't play the game well. And he closes the door saying game over and he slams it. And I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, this is a masterpiece. This is amazing. But yeah, so Jigsaw targeted them because Dr. Gordon, who's one of the guys that's in the room, he was cheating on his wife and didn't appreciate what he had, and that's something that Jigsaw is kind of known for in the series. He doesn't just target random people; he targets people who he believes deserve it because they don't see life as something that they're cherishing. And it's something that I really kind of like because it isn't like this random guy in the street who I'll get just to torture for fun. It's like no, like oh, you don't deserve life. Okay, then I'll put it to the test. If you deserve life, you would do anything to escape this trap. And some people do escape the traps, and they're like have a newfound a view on life. Some people escape the traps, and they're like, no, I didn't see the point of your trap. All I ended up doing was losing an arm or something. You and your sick games. This didn't make me deserve. This didn't make me appreciate life more. If anything, it made me hate it more because of the pain and everything I endured. And then there's people who just don't escape the traps, and that happens more often than not. And we see the gruesome outcome of most of these. But the first Saw movie, I would say its most iconic trap, and it's the trap that kind of defines the series, is the reverse bear trap, where we all know what a bear trap is. You step in, the thing closes on whatever steps in it, particularly bears. You'd hope a bear would stare and step in that. Or maybe not. I don't know. But so the reverse bear trap is put on someone's head, and instead of closing, it opens their jaws open. So it basically splits their head in half. We don't see it do its job because the person escapes. Her name is Amanda. Amanda will come in much later in the series. Actually, not much later. In the next installment, we'll go over Amanda more. But she escapes the trap.
Later.
She escapes the trap. Yeah, so Dr. Gordon was cheating on his wife, and that's why he was put in the sauce scenario. And Adam was hired by, I don't know who he was hired by. I think Jigsaw to take photos of Adam and what of Dr. Gordon, what he was doing. I don't remember why Adam was put in. He was just taking pictures of Dr. Gordon, I guess. That's why those two are in there. And then so then we get to Saw 2. And in Saw 2, if you watch Saw and then go to Saw 2, you can see an instant upgrade in terms of budget. Everything's much bigger scale. You have actual cops in the film. You did it in the first film, but you had like detectives. And you just film someone in a suit and call them a detective. But they had actual like police uniforms, police cars, bigger buildings, bigger sets, bigger traps, bigger contraptions. And Jigsaw, right? He's in his little warehouse and he's setting up traps and stuff. And the police managed to get a hit on him and his location. And so they arrive. The main police officer, Eric Matthews, played by Donnie Wahlberg, and he's like, he's in so many of these films, and I'm like, Jesus, dude, when is he gonna die? Just kill him off already. Eric Matthews. He arrives to Jigsaw's location. Him and his crew arrest him within the first like 5 or 10 minutes. That being said, numerous of the police officers that come with him end up dead because they end up in like weird traps throughout the warehouse. But they eventually capture Jigsaw. And I kind of feel bad for Jigsaw in some scenes because Eric Matthews just like roughs him up, like slap him in around, throw him in over tables and stuff. And he's like, "We got you, you sick bastard. Like, we're gonna put you in." And Jigsaw's like, "Oh, but you can't because I have your son, and your son's somewhere. And if you want to survive,
another twist.
Yeah, if you want to survive, you have to go find your son. Don't worry though, he's in a safe place, and that's key to remember. His son's in a safe place. And Eric Matthews is like, "Oh, what do we do?" And so he sends his officers out to try to scout wherever his son might be, and they're like, "We don't know where he's at." And the police, though, they uncover monitors, and it's screens, and it's of this group of people in this house, and they're like, "What is this?" And Jigsaw's like, "Oh, it's a group of people I have in the trap right now, and they're going through this house." And you see these people. And what I like about the Saw movies later is there's the main plot with Jigsaw and whatever he's dealing with, whether it be his apprentices or the police, and then there's the traps as a second subplot. But the traps are still connected and still important to the main plot. So while Eric Matthews is arguing with Jiggy about where his son is at, the house and the contraptions are going on. And I really like Saw 2. Saw 2 is pretty goddamn good. So the people go throughout the house and they're doing traps and whatnot. I don't know if you've seen Saw 2. there's one of my favorite. I don't know if you'd call it a trap, and you might remember it just for that is the when Amanda, because Amanda is part of the this new this new trap trap house. 'Cause that's what it is, and you're like, oh, what's Amanda doing here again? I thought she skipped the reverse bear trap. She's thrown into a pit of needles, and I remember seeing that being like, oh
Yeah, that
god,
was
that's
kind of
gruesome.
brutal.
That was horrendous. I like all of the traps in this one because there's a guy who has to go in like this. I don't know if it's where they cremate people, but it's this thing where you have to go in and it's like used to burn shit. And there Jigsaw always leaves recordings for people, and he's like, "Oh, and it's funny because the way he like always talks about the people he's about to like put in a trap, it kind of reflects the scenario they're about to go through. Because he's like, all throughout life, you burned people with the drugs you gave them. Now we'll see if you can survive this. And the guy ends up being burned or shit. It's I don't know, pretty sick. But yeah, besides Amanda, one of the other people who's revealed to be in this trap is Eric Matthews' son. And Eric Matthews is like, oh, shoot, this is the house we have to go to save my son. Like you said, he was in a safe place, but my son is in this house with all these lunatics and all these people. And what I like about the Saw movies is usually all the people that are in this trapped scenario have some sort of connection with each other. And they put together that everyone in that house has been, I believe, arrested by Eric Matthews or put away by Eric Matthews at some point or another.
Basically, a crowd you don't want your son in.
Yeah, and they're like, "Well, what's your connection? You're just a child." And it's revealed, "Oh, he's
And
a
then
child of this
this
police
kid
officer."
using his good 2 brain cells
And they're like,
discovers, it's probably not a good idea to tell them my dad's a cop. So he
"Yeah,
wisely shuts the fuck up and doesn't say
yeah."
anything.
They eventually do uncover it though, and then they're like, "Get that boy!" And they start chasing after
Yeah,
him.
my boy.
Amanda eventually helps him escape, and the officer he sees this Eric Matthews. He sees this on the TV screens, and he's like, "Well, take me to him, take me to him." And Jigsaw's like, "All right, but I have to put some sort of conditions first before I take him to you. No one can follow us. If I see any slight hint of a cop or anyone following us or tracing us, he dies. I'm sorry. Yeah, you got to come alone with me."
I'm
Which
sorry.
I would I would never
I'm
trust
sorry.
Jigsaw to go with him ever alone anywhere. If I were to live in the city, if I were a cop in this city, just go to another city. I'm sorry. Every cop in this city seems to fucking die. Eric Matthews is like, all right, Jiggy, I'll take you to where the house is at. And so he goes and he beats, but not before he beats up Jiggy. Sorry, I keep calling him Jiggy. Jigsaw.
The
And he
fuck
like
did you just call him? What
Jiggy,
the? No. We're gonna rewind that. What did you just call him?
Jiggy.
You have a nickname for him?
But he roughs up Jigsaw so badly that I feel bad for him. Jigsaw's like a black guy. He's bleeding from like every possible opening on his face. But Jigsaw's like, he's in the house. They eventually get to the house, and Eric Matthews storms in. But one thing that's revealed, and it's one of the many twists in this film, the recordings that are happening on that are happening on the screen in the warehouse. Those events happened hours ago. That's not something that's happening right now. So the son was never truly in any danger because that was in the past, and it was being played so that everyone could think it's currently happening with the events of Saw 2. But no, and this is one of the first instances where it's like, okay, already they're doing things. Something's happened in the past, and this is what's happening in the present. And so far, it makes sense though. And Eric Matthews puts that together. He's trapped in the house. He gets knocked out, and he's put in a trap. And another twist that's seen is Amanda, who's one of the players known for having the reverse bear trap in the first film and being one of the players in this trap house. She's revealed to be Jigsaw's apprentice, and she was only playing along to make sure that the game was played the way Jigsaw intended it to be played. And she's like, "What's up? I'm Jigsaw's apprentice." And Eric Matthews ends up being captured, and it's seen that she's one of the people who helped Jigsaw in the first film set up the trap of the first film, putting the things behind tiles and putting the things where they should be. And this is where you see the reason why Jigsaw didn't move at all throughout the first film, even though he was laying still on the ground, is because he injected himself with something that would slow down his heart rate and his breathing. So he
Yeah, what
would
if
be,
this guy was just like the best at hide and seek?
yeah, hiding in plain sight, and these fuckers couldn't notice. And then it's so revealed that Amanda is Jigsaw's apprentice, and Jigsaw has an apprentice, and this Amanda will be the first of many. It's revealed that Eric Matthews' son was indeed in a safe place because he was literally put in a safe in the warehouse where Eric Matthews was in the beginning of the film. And they find that out, and they're like, "Oh, his son was here the whole time." And the son's like, yeah, I was here the whole fucking time." And Eric Matthews bamboozled. He was led to the trap that Jigsaw wanted to put him in because he knew that Eric Matthews would rough up his criminals even though they were like arrested. He was like a dirty cop, and he would beat the ever living shit out of everyone he arrested. Just like you see him do to Jigsaw throughout the film, where he's like punching him, and you feel bad
And
because
just
Jigsaw's this
beating
old
the
guy.
ever
I mean,
living shit out of him.
he's an old man and he tortures people, but like, come on, he's just an old man. You see him like beating the hell out of him. He's like punching him in the spine and shit, and he's like, "That's your kidney. You want me to go for the other one?" And it's like, Jesus Christ. And then Jigsaw's
That's
like,
your
"This is
damn
what you get.
kidney. It's like, wait, please.
You treat people with this disrespect. You believe that their lives are meaningless. Well, let's see if you believe that your life is meaningless." And he puts him in the uh, he puts him in the same scenario that the people in the first film were in. So it's the same room, his legs attached to some pole, chained up, and he's like, "Game over." No, Amanda does it. Amanda's like, "It's me. I'm one of the apprentices. I help Jigsaw." And she does the iconic scene where she's like, "Game over," and she closes the door. I didn't mention what happened to the first two people in the first film. Uh Adam stays in the room, but Dr. Gordon, he cuts off his foot with the saw, and that's the iconic saw thing. He gets a hacksaw, and they're like, they don't want us to cut through our chains. They want us to cut through our feet. So he cuts off one of his foot. He cuts off his foot, and he like slides and slithers away into the darkness, and you never see him again. Don't worry, folks. We'll, like every loose thread in the series, we'll come back to it. So that's Saw 2, though. Saw 2 is Eric Matthews is in the same room, and you're like, "Oh, Adam is in that same room." Adam is dead. You see Adam's corpse there, as well as Zepp's corpse. So we already got two dead. This room would end up with like an insane amount of corpses in here. And you're like, "Oh, Adam, like, did he starve to death? What happened? Adam's dead." Don't worry, we'll find out in Saw 3. And so we get to Saw 3, and this is kind of where I start already getting my memories of the Saw films all messed up and jumbled into one mess. But Saw 3 is about a guy. His name is, I want to say Terry or Jerry. I might be wrong, but I'll call him Jerry. This is a guy who lost his son. And this is the B plot, right? The A plot is obviously Jigsaw and everything that's going on with him. And so Jigsaw, one thing that I failed to mention is that Jigsaw has cancer, brain cancer, and he's slowly dying. Yeah. And in the third film, and throughout the films, you see kind of his origin. So in the first film, it's revealed that he has cancer. In the second film, I believe it's revealed that the reason why he appreciates life is because he was in a car accident right after getting the news of he had cancer. He drove off in a wild rage, and he was like, "Well, life doesn't mean anything now since I'm basically a ticking time bomb. I'm gonna die." And then he crashes, and he like gets impaled on something, but he survives, and he's like, "No, this isn't meaning, like, even though I have a death sentence, basically, I still have something to live for. I should appreciate these moments I have." And then he realizes he appreciates life even though he doesn't have enough life left in him. But there are people out there who have their entire lives before them, but they don't appreciate it. He's like, "Those fuckers better appreciate it. I better leave my mark on this world before I go." And that's what set him off on his journey. Don't worry, that's not the ending of his origin, because we will go further and develop his origin even more. Some elements which I don't like, but whatever. Saw 3, though, Jigsaw's basically on his deathbed, and he's like, he needs like an oxygen thing, a respirator, and he's like, "Oh, I think this is it. I'm gonna die. Amanda, I need a doctor to operate on my brain." And he's like, "I can't necessarily go to a hospital because they're gonna arrest my ass." And so Amanda goes, and she kidnaps Dr. Lin, takes Dr. Lin
As
to
you
where
do.
Jigsaw's at. And yeah, as you do. Yeah, I mean, understandable. I don't know if Jigsaw has medical coverage. Don't worry, we'll find that out in Saw 6. But
His
if
medical
you
coverage.
that's like the main plot point of Saw 6, kind of. He kidnaps Lynn, and they put this device over Lynn's neck, and it's horrifying. Just ask her, hey, would you want to operate on me? Hey, if I were in her situation, I'd be like, yeah, I'd gladly. Just don't put that shit on my neck. I'll do it. I'll do it. Just don't do this. Don't put me in this contraption.
But
But
that's how he
yeah,
do.
that's how he rolls. And they put this thing on her neck, so if Jigsaw's heart stops for any reason, it'll go off, and that device will kill her. I think it'll like do something to her neck. And so she has every incentive then to make sure that Jigsaw does not die. She's like, okay, well, I need to do surgery now because his brain is swelling. And they're like, well, we have these saws and these tools that we use to torture people. Can you make surgery with that? And she's like, that's inadequate. That's not even sanitized. Half that shit's fucking rusted. We need to take him to the hospital. And they're like, no, that's not even possible. So that's a plot, right? Lynn has to do surgery on Jigsaw, and there's many times where you see Jigsaw like almost flatline. She's like, no, we gotta shock him back to life. We gotta do this shit. Jigsaw's always, and then she eventually does like an operation on his head to relieve the pressure, and it's gruesome as fuck. It's like, ugh. But B plot is this guy named Jerry, or what I assume his name is Jerry, and he can get over the death of his
I
son,
think you've
and
called him 3 different names at this point.
yeah, I don't know. He's unremarkable in this series, and unfortunately, he's in 3 of these films. But he can't get over the death of his son, and he's always stuck in this past moment and cherishing his son. And I mean, I don't blame him. It's freaking son. It's a little boy that he lost. Like, god damn it, Jigsaw, calm down. Terry can't get over. Sorry, Jerry. You're right. I've called him numerous
You've
things.
called him 3 different names at this point.
Whatever name I say, you guys know what guy I'm talking about. Jerry, he's put in this giant warehouse where he has to go through various scenarios, and he's not put in traps, but there's other people in these traps that he has to save. But the people that are in these traps were involved with his son's death. For instance, one of the people involved was I think like a lawyer who is the reason why the guy who ended up killing his son, which I think was in a vehicular accident. I might be wrong. The lawyer who was obviously on the guy who killed his son's side. She is the reason why the son went free, and so he's like, because of you, like the guy went free, and she's like, it's my job, and she's like being frozen because she's naked in this like refrigeration room, and water's being sprayed on her, so she's freezing, and he's like, all he has to do is just push this button or something, and it'll stop, and she'll be set free, and he just stands there for minutes and like admiring her body or something, and he's just looking. He's like, yeah, but you let my son go. You let the guy go, and she's like, just fucking push the button. I'm
Yeah.
freezing. I'm dying. And every time you save someone, it's always at the last minute. He pushes the button eventually, and what's the point? She's dead. She's frozen, and he's like, oh, well, my job here's done. Let me go to the next victim.
My
And the
job here
next,
is done.
yeah. And the next guy he goes to is the judge who resided over the court case, and he's like, because of you, like the guy went free, and the judge is like, he's like attached to the bottom of this giant, like, I don't know what you'd call it, this giant container, this giant whatever the fuck it is. And uh as time goes, pigs will be dropped in, but they will be like put in like in this meat grinder, but they're like old rotten pigs, and you see like flies and like mold all over them, and the pigs get like all scrunchied up, and they get tossed in there, and he'll eventually drown once like a certain amount of pigs get dropped in, and
Like pig guts.
he'll be drowning in disgusting rotten pig guts. It's fucking disgusting. I always get nauseous when I see that, because like he's like gasping for air, and shit goes in his mouth, and I'm like, it's disgusting. But the same thing happens again. He's like, you put him away, and this guy's Johnny. He's like, help me, like this shit's horrendous. Please, no one deserves this. And he's like, yeah, well maybe you do because you put my son away. Eventually, though, this is one of the few people that he ends up saving, and he's like, all right, I'll let you go. I'll let you go. And so then it's Terry and the judge, and they're walking through scenarios. and they eventually come to the last guy, and it's possibly my favorite trap of the movie of this film, and it's called the rack. And Jigsaw even says on a recording, "Oh, I personally lamed this because I think it's pretty interesting." And it's the last guy is the person who ran over his son. This is the guy who killed his son, and Terry has to face with him, and he's like, "You put my son away." But at this point, because of Terry's inactions, you're kind of rooting for the guy who killed his son instead of Terry, because like, no, you
Yeah, I
asshole,
mean,
let
at this
everyone
point,
die. Yeah, and then so the rack, this guy's strung up. His limbs are attached. His neck is attached to something, and as time goes, every single one of his limbs are being twisted. So you see his arm do like a complete like 360 as it's twisting his flesh, and you hear his bones breaking. And he's like, "Just pull the lever or whatever. Like, do the thing, please." And he's like, "No, oh no." There's a
I
shotgun.
don't think I will.
There's a shotgun he has to like work with or whatever. He ends up shooting the judge and killing the judge, so he saved the judge for not. The judge
He
ended up
saved
dead
the
anyway,
judge only to murk his
only to
ass
kill him
himself.
anyway. Yeah, and then the rack after it like twists all of his limbs, it then goes to his head, and you see it slowly twisting his neck, and it's gruesome, but it's amazing, dude. And this guy's like screaming, and Terry's like, "Alrighty, I'll save you." Once all his limbs have been broken and shattered, but the moment he tries to save him, the guy's already facing backwards, and there's no point. And you hear like his bones just breaking, and he's like, "Oh, well, he's dead too." On to the next scenario. And one thing I failed to mention is C plot. I guess it's C plot because there's another plot point that I forgot to mention, but it's integral to the series. Even though Jigsaw, right? There's the whole thing where like Lynn is operating on Jigsaw, and then there's Terry going through all the scenarios. What's Amanda doing? And what's Jigsaw's thing with her? Well, Amanda, she is taking up the Jigsaw mantle, and she's putting all these traps into effect. But the thing with her traps is that her traps are inescapable. She makes it so that her people can't escape traps. And another one of my favorites, this is one of those films where I can't choose which is my favorite trap between the rack or this other thing, which I think it's like the first trap of the film, and it's Officer Carrie, I think is her name. She was one of my favorite people from the original trilogy, and she ended up dying in this film. Uh, but her death is one of my favorites in the franchise. She's trapped to this contraption, which I'll call a blood eagle, because it reminds me of that thing from Midsommar, where it's a trap to her rib cage, and the only way to unlock it is by getting a key. But the key's in a vat of acid, and she has to put her hand in it, pull out the key, and she has a ticking time bomb because the key will dissolve in the acid. And if that's not enough incentive, there's past a certain amount of time, the thing will open up her rib cage, killing her. And so she sticks her hand in the vat of acid, and you see her go through this gruesome ordeal. I'm rooting for her because I feel bad for her because I liked her character in the first couple films. And she pulls out her hand all burned, and she puts the key in the thing, and she does it. She saves herself in time, but the rib cage won't open up because it's done in such a way that it's made to not allow her to escape. And then she sighs, and like in a moment of she just gives up, and she's like, I can't. This is inescapable, and it's shot beautifully in a weird way, and it just rips open her rib cage, and it like just displays her like torn in half, and it's like, oh my god. But yeah, that's one of the scenarios where it's like her traps are inescapable. So that's C plot, and C plot is integral to what happens to A plot, and B plot is integral
You
to
can
how
you
A
can
plot.
begin to see how the convolutedness
Yeah,
continues with every movie, because like every movie
yeah,
there's
and it
like
just gets
every movie is just like, but wait, there's more, and then they fucking
more.
like it gets to a point where half the movie, like in the later films, almost half the
It's
movie is
flashbacks.
just flashbacks. So the first films to remind you
Yeah,
what's going on in the retcon, and it's just like, well, you know,
yeah, particularly part five. I think part five is almost purely flashbacks. But yeah, you're right. And then numerous where like the first film was just one plot. Part two is two plots: the house and Eric Matthews and Jigsaw. Part three is already three plots, and I forgot to mention Eric Matthews is also in this film, but he's only seen in the beginning. You catch up with him. He's in the room. Oh, what does he do in the room? He gets one of
drugs.
the huh? No, he's attached to that. Remember, by via chain, his foot's attached to like that same room scenario that was seen in the first film. And he's like, okay, well, I gotta escape. And he sees a foot there, and he's like, well, this guy cut off his foot. I don't want to do that to my foot. So he gets like, I don't know what you'd call it. It's like the top of a toilet. I thought he was gonna use it to smash his chains, but instead he smashes his foot, and his foot becomes like mush. And he like slithers his foot out of the chains in such a gruesome way. And I'm like, oh my god. And then Eric Matthews like starts to slither away, kind of like Dr. Gordon in the first film. Don't worry, we'll catch up with both of them because Eric Matthews, spoilers, doesn't get too far before Amanda finds him slithering, and she's like, "Oh no, you don't. This wasn't
Oh
a
no, you don't, you slippery bastard.
yeah, that trap wasn't quite it for you. Like unlike everyone else who's being tested by that, you have yet to be tested. You're just being held momentarily. I don't know why you smashed your own foot. You're not even being put through any scenario yet." So he's put away again, and we'll catch up with Eric Matthews again in the fourth film. But Amanda's making these traps inescapable for everyone, and Jigsaw has noticed that. So, and this is where it all ties in. And I would say it's pretty spectacular, but it's still convoluted as fuck. This is one of those films where if you go to the bathroom for like a minute or so and you come back, you're gonna already have missed a major plot point in the film. That's
Yeah.
for most of these. So you can't you can't miss any scene because every scene's integral. So Terry eventually stumbles upon the room where Jigsaw, Lynn, and Amanda are at. But before he does so, it's revealed, this is the major twist, Lynn is Terry's husband, wife, sorry. Lynn is Terry's god damn it. Lynn is Terry's wife. And she also dealt with her husband's grief and their grief over their child. But I believe, I'd be wrong, but I think it's that she got over it, whereas her husband didn't. So she's trying to put them in the scenarios to kind of show their difference or whatever. I might be getting that wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. That's how plot point A ties into plot point B. She is Terry's wife. And the events that Terry is going through is in the same warehouse where Jigsaw, Amanda, and Lynn are in. And the end tour that Terry is giving himself will lead to that room, to where Lynn is at, and Amanda, and Jigsaw. And then we got plot point C, where this ties in eventually. Amanda and her inescapable traps. Everything that was put in motion in regards with Lynn, starting from the first film, was all meant to be one final trap or game for Amanda to test her. Can you get over all of your, I don't know, self-centered bullshit or whatever, and make an inescapable trap? Can you get over everything and finally realize what I've taught you? And there's a point in the movie where you see her kind of get jealous of Lynn and how Jigsaw sees Lynn, because Jigsaw's like, oh, like you're saving me, like you're giving me like life and whatnot. And Amanda gets jealous of this. I don't know. Don't do anything stupid. Like this is your test. Eventually, though, Jerry comes upon the room. Jerry sees Jigsaw laying. Jigsaw, and then Lynn's like, wait, don't, because she's about to explain that like if Jigsaw dies, I die. Terry, because Terry hasn't learned jack shit from everything he's gone through, shoots Jigsaw.
Yeah, just being the bastard that he is.
Yeah, no, I think he shoots Amanda. Amanda falls as she
Does he?
falls.
Oh yeah, he
Yeah,
does. Yeah.
yeah. Amanda falls and she shoots Lynn, and Lynn falls, and then he's like, no, and he goes to Lynn, and he's like, Jigsaw's like on his deathbed, and he's like, Amanda, like you weren't supposed to like shoot her, like that was your task, like you have
That
failed
was
me.
your
The
whole
last hopes
point.
I had for you, like you failed. Game over, Amanda. And Amanda's like, she's bleeding out. And Lynn's like, you can still like save us. And Jerry's like, I will. But I gotta get rid of this fucker. And he goes to Jigsaw, and she's like trying to like say like no, wait, but she's like gurgling on her own blood. And Terry takes up a saw out of, it's like a miter saw, whatever, and he swings it over Jigsaw's throat, cutting his throat in half. And eventually he dies, and then Jigsaw's like contraption blows up, and Terry's like, oh, she's dead. Um,
Just like
and
that?
then that's where the film ends. Terry's dead. No, Terry doesn't die, I think. Lynn dies, Jigsaw dies, Amanda dies, everyone dies except for Terry. I don't know.
Unfortunately.
Let me see where Terry comes up again. But then we get to Saw 4.
I like how you
I'm
went from
sorry if
calling
I
him Jerry to what was
Terry.
Jerry, Gary, and now Terry.
Sorry. Let me get to Saw 4. And it's like, oh wow, Jigsaw's dead. And they make a point, yeah, Jigsaw is dead because the movie opens up with his autopsy. And it's such a gruesome ordeal where they zoom in on everything they're doing. So like they're cutting open his chest and they like rip it open. They rip open his rib cage and they like you hear the cry. It's like ASMR where you hear every noise and every squir. And they like look at his head and they're like, wow, like they like did some sort of weird home surgery on this guy's head. And they found all these bodies, Amanda, Lynn, and everyone. And so you're like, oh, this must take place after Saw 3, obviously, right? Because they find Jigsaw dead. Yes, but then this is Saw 4 to me is where it just gets confusing immediately. It doesn't get cleared up until Saw 5 and Saw 6. But Saw 4 to me was like, oh my god, this is already convoluted. I mean, it already was to begin with, but this is where it gets even more so. Detective Hoffman. He's integral to the plot of this film, and he was seen actually in the third film, and I think maybe the second film, but he was set up in the third film. So
Which
Detective Hoffman,
leaves to make you think like, did they knowingly retcon it? Like, did they set this up knowing they were gonna retcon that later, or was it just like
I
after the
think
fact?
so because in Saw 3, one of the scenes that we see Amanda kind of get jealous over, she opens up a letter, but we don't see what's in the letter, and that what's in that letter isn't revealed until Saw 6, I think. And it's like, wait,
Jesus
do they plan that
Christ.
out? Because that one letter, like, it's such a weird scene because it doesn't make sense
That's
in
the
the
thing. It's
context.
like, why even include stuff like that if you're not going to explain it for not even in the next movie, but 2 movies away? Like,
And then,
what's the point?
yeah, it makes sense if you see Saw 6 why she's distraught and why she acts the way she acts in Saw 3, where it's like she's doing all these things against Jigsaw, but it's because of Saw 6. But then it's like, damn, that you got to you find that out later down the line. He's dead. And while they're doing the autopsy, Detective Hoffman's like, I want to make sure, like this is it. There's no shenanigans here. They of course find a little thing in his intestine that he had swallowed, and you see him swallow it in Saw 3, but it's such a small scene where he has like this little, it's like a hard drive, and he pours wax over it and he swallows it. But it's so like such a small scene that in part 4 you're like, did he do that? So when you go back to Saw 3, you're like, oh wait, he did do that.
Yeah,
It
I
just
mean,
didn't.
it's like such small shit.
Yeah, and
So
it's like,
annoying.
were they setting this up? But then they play the tape, and the reason why it was covered in wax is so like it wouldn't be damaged when it goes to his system, I guess. And then so they play it, and it's a recording, and it's like, oh, Detective Hoffman, you may believe you're off the hook, but you have still yet to be tested. Don't worry, although even though you, and it's said in a way that like it doesn't incriminate Hoffman because spoilers, Hoffman is the next Jigsaw. Uh, it's said in a way like even though like you believe you have gone through trials yourself, you still have yet to be tested, and that won't happen until Saw 6. That'll happen until Saw 6. Which again, it's like wow, like I don't know if they started from the beginning laying this map out, but sure, I guess. So, oh, what is this trap? And then in Saw 4, you're introduced to new characters. Agent Strom. This is where the FBI gets involved because they're like, alrighty, well, this is clearly out of control. Agent Strom, Agent Perez, and her partner, whose name I can't remember, but he's this older guy. The 3 of them, right? They go and they start to uncover who the next Jigsaw is. Uh, Hoffman ends up being captured, quote unquote, captured by the new Jigsaw because, as I revealed earlier, he is the new Jigsaw, so he just puts himself in the trap. You have this detective officer named Riggs. I think his name is Riggs, and he's being. It seems like he's being groomed to be the new Jigsaw, and he's given scenarios where he's like, you, because in the beginning of the film, Hoffman's like, hey, like calm down, like because they in the beginning of the film. And I'm sorry if I'm keep going back and forth because I'm barely remembering things, but half of this is integral to the series before we move forward. They find I think her name is Kelly's body with the ribs open from the third film. They find her body and they're like, she was one of us. She was a police officer. Why
She
was this
was
done to
one
her?
of us.
Yeah, and like, why was this done to her? And they're like, well, we know Amanda and Jigsaw were both the killers. So like, I don't know, one of them had a sick motive or something. And that's when the agents revealed, like, no, they can't have done that because uh Jigsaw is this old guy who was on the verge of dying. He had cancer. He had literally no strength left. And Amanda was trying to carry out the traps that she could, but like she couldn't have done everything because she isn't. And they reveal like her stats and everything, where she's small, she's not that strong. She couldn't have done this herself. And they're like, there has to be a third
Sexist.
person involved. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it kind of is. But they reveal like through that there's another Jigsaw out there, and they don't know who it is, but they believe it might be someone on the inside, someone who works at the police department. And it's pretty sick how they start like piecing it together, like trying to see like, well, who can we trust in the police department? And this being said, you still don't know it's Hoffman. That's the twist of this movie. Hoffman is the Jigsaw killer, the new apprentice, the second apprentice, and Riggs is being set up by this new Jigsaw. And he's being set up like, you have to think the way I think. You have to see things the way I do. You have to understand justice is not this clear cut thing. And he comes across many scenarios of, I think the first chick he finds is this hooker or whatever, and he's like, look at her as she wastes her life away or whatever, or she's a drug addict. And I think she's a drug abuser actually. Whatever though, but he's like, you in order for you to learn your lesson, you have to go with what I say. Either this person you like dies or she dies. You got to pick and choose. And so you see Riggs kind of start, I wouldn't say appreciate Jigsaw, but he's like learning the way Jigsaw thinks. And one of the guys who ends up getting tortured, I'm like, yeah, that guy kind of deserves it. Is this hotel owner or this motel owner? He owns like this inn, and he like lets in like ladies check in. When ladies check in as they sleep, he like goes into their room and he like does disgusting things with them at their mercy. And
Ew.
uh yeah. And then Riggs comes across the hotel because he was being sent by Jigsaw because there's like clues and he's piecing this together. He's like, go to this location and stuff. And then he goes to the owner, and the owner's like, he's like this innocuous guy, and he's just like a regular everyday guy. He's like, oh hey, like you want to check in? Riggs is hesitant at first because he's like, this guy like he didn't do anything. And then Jigsaw, because he always has his tapes, and Billy the Puppet and whatnot. Billy the Puppet appears on screen and he's like, oh, this man may seem like an ordinary man, but that's something that like people don't realize, that they encounter like rapists and thieves and murderers every day. They're just regular people and they blend in, but you never see it. And this guy, and they show on tape recordings that this guy has like recorded himself doing like disgusting things, and Riggs looks away and he's like, that's you, like you did that shit, you did that to your own customers and the people. And he's like, yeah. And like I get away with it because like, but he's like crying. He's like, I'm sorry, like I just, it's impulses or whatever. And that's when Riggs is like, no, like put yourself in the trap. And then the guy's like, no, I won't do it. And then Riggs is like, put it in the trap, or I'll put you in myself. And so this is where you see like Riggs like, oh, like Riggs is starting to like take charge. He's like doing Jiggy's work. And so this is one of the guys where I'm like, yeah, that guy
He's
deserves to
getting
be in that
jiggy with
fucking
it,
trap.
as the kids say.
And yeah. And so eventually at the end of the trap, his limbs get torn apart. That's one of the few people in the series where I'm like, that guy deserves it. And that's where Riggs, and you see Riggs encountering people in situations like that, where it's these ordinary people, but they've gotten away with disgusting things because they haven't been revealed as to what they've done. But one of the main reasons why Riggs is being tested, or not being tested, but being put in this weird scenario where he's doing some of Jigsaw's work, is because Hoffman, as I said, is the new Jigsaw, and he's putting him through these scenarios because Hoffman has seen how Riggs operates. He's very careless. He doesn't look at the clues. He doesn't understand people's motives. And it said that he always goes through a door running, not ever looking around his surroundings. And each of these scenarios is made for him to appreciate that, or rather analyze that, because he's analyzing clues, he's analyzing situations, he's analyzing the traps and how Jigsaw operates, and he's analyzing how everything has to work. So you're like, oh, Riggs is learning his lesson, just take a chill pill, okay? At the end of the film, though, it's real. No, he didn't learn jack shit. So
Of course.
so this is where we
What
come
kind of
back
movie
to,
would it be if you learned his lesson?
yeah. And this is one of the movies where you can't watch Saw 4. You can maybe watch Saw 3 on your own, because they do kind of explain the events of the first two films. Saw 4, though, you really have to watch all three movies before, because this is where they bring Eric Matthews back, the guy from the second film, the police officer. He's strung up on this block of ice, and this is the finale trap. And this is one of my favorite traps. in one of my not so favorite movies. But it's this huge block of ice he's standing on, and he's being like strung up by his neck, and he's like barefoot on it. So if the ice melts, he ends up hung. Up above him are these two huge blocks of ice, and when I mean blocks of ice, they're like the size of my bed, each block alone. And these blocks of ice are attached to a contraption, and the block of ice he's standing on is slowly melting. But he's like on a weird scale that teeter totters. He's on one end of the scale. Hoffman's on the other, strapped to a chair. And this weird scale, if it teeters to one side, all the water will spill over to Hoffman, and it'll spill over to this electrical outlet that will shock them both. And so Eric Matthews has to not, in a weird way, he has to make sure that his ice doesn't melt. So he's like not standing. He has to make sure he doesn't stand on the ice for too long or whatever, because his heat will melt it. But then Hoffman has to not move, so as to move it to one side and electrocute them both. And it's pretty sick. It's pretty sick. And then you're like, what are these two blocks of ice at the top for, though? Briggs sees this, and instead of analyzing and looking at everything, he charges through the door, which sets the trap off. The two blocks of ice come down on Eric Matthews, and they like, so one comes down from his right, one comes down for his left, and he's made a Eric Matthews sandwich, and he's like, his head just blows up. And it's such an awesome kill. And then the ice and the water spills to one side because Eric Matthews dies and that half is destroyed. And Hoffman falls onto the water, and it's like, oh no, Hoffman dies. But then Hoffman gets up because the electrical outlet doesn't work, and he was like, I was Jigsaw the whole time. And the agent Riggs is like, what? And then Hoffman, I think, kills Riggs, and he's like, you didn't learn your lesson. And this whole scenario was put up for you to listen. Eric Matthews could have gone away with his life. We could have saved this guy from like movie 2, but your inability to learn has caused his death and so on. And it's like, oh, okay. And then Agent Strom, though. Agent Strom. So, okay. And then, again, I forgot B-plot. Agent Strom, Agent Perez, and the other guy, they go throughout the film, and they're trying to piece together who this new Jigsaw is. They're slowly, I think, putting together that Riggs might be it. Agent Perez is taken out by some sort of gas or this weird thing when she encounters Billy the Puppet, and his face blows up in her face. So she's hospitalized, and I forget what happens to the older guy. But Agent Strom, he's found the warehouse of where all the events of Saw 3 took place in. So the room where Jigsaw, and the room where Lynn, and the room where Amanda were in. And he arrives, and this is where the timeline gets convoluted. So I'm sorry, guys. I don't remember if their bodies
Not
are
that
still
it
in it. I
wasn't
think their
convoluted
bodies.
already.
Yeah, I think their bodies are in the room. Hold on, let me remember this. Yeah. I think their bodies are still in the room. And this is where I got confused because I was like, wait a minute, but the beginning starts with their autopsy, and the whole point of this movie is that it takes place after the autopsy, right?
No.
But how are their bodies still in the room? But it's true that no, that took place in the past, and this is how they find Jigsaw's bodies. And then that leads to the beginning of the film, and that the events of. So let me explain this really quick. So Strom finds this warehouse. Strom walks into the room. He finds all their dead bodies. Detective Hoffman steps in, and he sees Strom in the room. Strom doesn't see him though, and Hoffman closes the door on him, locking him in there. And that's how the film ends. And you're like, okay, so Strom in this room now, where all the bodies are at. But how does Strom escape? Because we see him in the beginning when they're doing the autopsy, and we see their bodies there, so we know he escapes. So the events that I just explained with Riggs and everything, that happens before the autopsy, and the autopsy actually happens in the future. So the autopsy scene actually doesn't take place until a while. Until we have yet to get to that scene. But that was the beginning of part 4. So after Saw 3, where everyone dies in that room, ignore the autopsy scene. That's where Riggs and everyone finds Carrie's body strung up with the ribs open, and that's where they start trying to investigate. Someone on the inside must be doing it. And Hoffman sets up his trap with Eric Matthews and Riggs, and everything happens. Strom gets trapped in the room, and then eventually down the line, Strom will escape. He'll call the police over. They'll take Jigsaw's body and everyone's bodies, and then they'll eventually do the autopsy scene. That's where they find the chip in his intestine, and they'll play the tape that says, "Hoffman, you still have yet to be tested." So this is where I'm like, okay, well, they're clearly planning this out. And at some point in the franchise, they planned out all these movies. But that this is part 4 is where I get hella confused, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? Things are happening in the future. Some of these aren't even flashbacks; they're flash forwards or whatever. Movie 4, the convoluted mess to me ends with Strom stuck in this room, and you're like, oh, okay, like, well, Strom's in here, but the bodies aren't there. So then we get to Saw 5, and I like Saw 5. Some people don't like Saw 5. I like it because it takes its slow time. It takes its slow pace to explain everything that has happened so far. Why is Hoffman the new Jigsaw? Where were the bodies? And well, with Jigsaw's body, how did they eventually end up in the autopsy scene? How does Strom escape? Saw 5 opens up with this guy being strapped to the table. Oh, my favorite trap from Saw 4, the whole ice thing is amazing, and the teeter-tottering, it's pretty sick, where they have to work together to make sure that they don't
They
kill
used
each
real
other or whatever.
ice. Quick, we gotta shoot the film before the ice melts.
Yeah, dude, that's insane. I don't know how Jigsaw has his budget to keep doing all this.
Well, it's because every
But
year the budget gets higher.
no, I mean, like, in continuity in the movies, how does Jigsaw have enough? Where does he get all this money from to
It's
do all
true.
this? Like, how does he get warehouses and stuff? I saw 5, and I'm sorry if I've already turned people off with what I'm trying to explain here, but listen, this is amazing. This is amazing stuff to me. This shit fascinates me for some reason. Um, Saw 5. It opens up with a guy laid to a table, and there's this blade. You've seen the live action Scooby Doo movie, right? Where there's like these giant like blades that like Velma and Fred and everyone has to like jump through or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like one of those, and
Yeah, it makes it real.
yeah, and it's like, oh, it's gonna cut through you in half if you don't do this thing, and the guy does the thing, but he ends up being killed anyways, and then Hoffman, you see Hoffman making sure that he dies. And Hoffman sets it up so people believe that it's Jigsaw, that it's the actual Jigsaw, John Kramer. But Jigsaw's dead. But you see Hoffman setting it all up. And you're like, oh, why did Hoffman make sure that guy died? Hoffman isn't like Amanda, though, where he makes his traps inescapable. He kind of gives him a chance. But that specific guy, he makes sure he dies. And it's a throwaway beginning, opening scene, but it's kind of integral to Hoffman's character. So Hoffman is revealed that he was a police officer. And that scene in the beginning takes place before movie 1. It takes place before movie 1, and this is where movie 5 is half of it's basically flashbacks. That scene was taken before Hoffman became Jigsaw's apprentice. Hoffman found out everything that Jigsaw was doing, and he made his own trap to kill this specific guy because this guy is responsible for the death of Hoffman's sister, I believe. So he put him in this trap, and Jigsaw found out, like, wait, someone's copying my moves and framing me for a death that I didn't do. That trap was inescapable. I don't make my traps like that. So Jigsaw eventually ends up capturing Hoffman, and he's like, and mind you, half of this film is flashback. Jigsaw's like, why are you doing this? And Hoffman's like, listen, I'm not a killer, but I had to do this for this one reason, because I think he was like his brother-in-law, and he was like my sister was living a hell with this guy, and because of him, she's dead. I don't want to follow in your footsteps. This was just a one-time deal. I'm not a killer, and I kind of made sure of that because the trap killed him. I didn't kill him. The trap did. And Jigsaw's like, no, like, if you ever do traps, you have to learn. And this is where you see Jigsaw like teaching Hoffman, like, no, like, you got to do this, you have to do that. And Jigsaw kind of takes up Hoffman as like this mentorship role. And you see, and this is where I'm like, no, this ties in still with the previous movies, because you see Amanda interact with Hoffman, and then you see, although Amanda was setting up some simple traps, Hoffman was the one doing like the big heavy traps and the contraptions, and they're all working together, this trio of jigsaws, and they're like doing their
Trio
scenarios
of
and
jiggies.
trio of jiggies. And it's pretty sick because it's like, oh yeah, and even though some people consider the movie boring because it doesn't move the plot forward, I'm glad that I sits down and it's like, okay, let me explain everything and how it all ties together. Part 4 left me confused and befuddled. Part 5's like, let me explain it to you guys. So they explain everything and how Hoffman eventually came to be the way he was. And that opening scene is essentially what led Hoffman on his journey to becoming Jigsaw. And so while Amanda, Lynn, and Jigsaw were in that room, and Terry was doing his own thing, and everything was happening, while all of that was happening, the events of that room where Lynn was doing the operation, everything that happened in Saw 4 happened simultaneously with Saw 3. The rigs going because you're like, well, why wasn't Hoffman in that room with them? Well, because Hoffman was setting up Riggs as the new Jigsaw, putting him through these traps where he has to analyze everything, while Amanda was being tested by Jigsaw and Lynn was operating and Terry was going through the same thing. So
Because
both were happening
it's
at the same
efficient like
time.
that.
Yeah. And so when they all died in the room, that's when Agent Strom enters the room and Hoffman locks them up. So Saw 3 and Saw 4 happen at the same time. So that's why I say you can't watch Saw 4 without having seen the previous 3 films.
Yeah, and this is when it
Um,
starts getting to the point where it's like, okay,
yeah,
maybe
if
it's
you
a
jump
little
in at
too
any point,
convoluted.
yeah, you're lost. Um, so then, yeah, so continuing Saw 5, uh, uh, so to move the plot forward, right? So all that's flashbacks. To move, oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, part 4 and part 5 and the rest of them, they further explore, and it is also integral to the series. Aside from all those flashbacks, they go to further flashback and they flashback to Jigsaw's origin because we're not done with his origin. Turns out Jigsaw is married, and the reason why Jigsaw is also more miserable in his before he became Jigsaw is because he had a wife, and his wife had well, she was going to have a child, but there was a miscarriage due to the hands of a guy who was careless, and because of him, they lost their baby, and Jiggy and his wife they split. But eventually, in like Saw 5 or whatever, it's revealed that but like his wife was in on everything, so she's basically another Jigsaw. And it's like Jesus Christ, how many Jigsaws are there? I'm only mentioning that because that will come later. Her name's Jill Tuck. Put that in the back of your mind; it'll come back later. Hoffman. So Strom's locked in that room, right? Strom eventually is taken care of by Hoffman. Hoffman puts him in a trap. Strom doesn't know, Agent Strom doesn't know that Hoffman is Jigsaw. He has not seen his face yet or his identity. But over the course of this film, Strom is putting everything together that, oh no, this is definitely Hoffman. Strom is put in this scenario, but it's made to be inescapable. So no one can survive and say, hey, Hoffman might be the Jigsaw killer. And Hoffman is attached to this container his head's in a container and it's filled with water jugs, and the container will fill up with water. He's not meant to escape this, and he's supposed to drown. But eventually, somehow he does escape through some weird thing where he like opens up a thing in his throat so he could breathe through that or whatever. But he ends up escaping. And Hoffman, because remember, this all takes place after events of Saw 3 and 4, because 3 and 4 happened at the same time, except for the autopsy scene, which we have yet to see. Uh, Hoffman got off that ice contraption, and the police arrive, and they're like, "Oh, Hoffman, are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm the only survivor after having set up Strom in his own trap. I was the only survivor. Eric Matthews was on this ice thing and ended up being crushed, and Riggs died because he didn't follow some Jigsaw sick trap. Oh, and there's also a room where Amanda was the other Jigsaw because that also happened at the same time. And Amanda and Jigsaw are dead, and Lynn is dead, and all these people are dead. The people that I was dealing with and the people that they were dealing with are all dead. Oh, and I think Agent Strom is dead too. I think Agent Strom drowned. And they pull out Agent Strom like, no, like he survived. And this is where Hoffman's like, oh fuck, he's alive. Like I messed up. And so that's this film, and it's pretty sick. I like the tension. Strom is slowly putting the pieces together. Wait a minute, how did Hoffman survive? Wasn't he? Because they analyzed the trap and he's like, shouldn't he have died if the water went to one side? Shouldn't he have gotten electrocuted? Was there some sort of did the outlet not work? But then he's like, that's not Jigsaw's MO. Of course it'd work. He would have tested that. And then he's like, why did he live? And he's like, wait, why was I intended to kill? Why was my trap inescapable? Was I not supposed to survive? Am I not supposed to put these pieces together? And it's like it's pretty sick because he's slowly catching on to Hoffman. And at the end, it's essentially Hoffman v. Strom. And this is what makes the movie amazing to me. The whole movie, Hoffman is like, Strom, you gotta trust me. Please trust me. That's the whole theme of this movie. And keep in
Please,
mind,
please.
yeah. So plot A, Strom versus Hoffman. Plot B is tying back to explaining how Hoffman worked with Amanda and Jigsaw. and how Saw 4 takes place simultaneously with Saw 3. Plot C is explaining Jill Tuck's origin and Jigsaw's origin. And I completely neglected to fail to talk about plot D. I love plot D. So the whole movie is
so many, Robert? Why is there so many plots?
So you know how in every movie there's like a giant scenario where people are in traps. I forgot to mention that. There are, you know how like in part 2 there was the house, and part 1 there's a room, and then in part 4 there was part 3 there was Terry walking through at the factory, and then part 4 was Riggs setting up the traps. Part 5 there's this group of people. There's 5 of them. And let me explain it after everything, okay? so Hoffman is like, okay, Strom, you have to trust me. And this whole movie is like, you gotta trust me. Just believe in me. Like, believe everything I say. And Strom doesn't believe everything he says. And there's this room, and there's this glass case that you see Jigsaw's been building since like Saw 3 or Saw 4, and it finally pays off in this one. And it's this glass case, and the recording says like, "Oh, Agent Strom," and it's done in Hoffman's voice instead of John Kramer's voice. So Strom's like, "Aha! I knew it was you." And he's like, "If you trust me, and you've listened to my stuff, I've been giving you this whole time, go put yourself in the box, and you will be free to go, and you will survive." And if you know Jigsaw, you're not gonna want to put yourself in the glass box. And Hoffman steps in, and Hoffman steps into the room, and Strom's like, You're the new Jigsaw. I've put it all together." And he's like, "Step in the box, Strom." And Strom's like, "No, I'm not gonna step in the box, you asshole." And they eventually have like a fight, a tussle. And Strom puts Hoffman in the box, and he closes it, and the box can't be opened until after like a couple minutes. And Strom's like, "There, you're on your own trap." And Hoffman, this is where like they play the theme. Every time there's a twist, they play the "I love the theme," the Saw theme. And Hoffman's like, "I've been telling you should trust me this whole time. That's the whole theme. I've been trying to set this up and condition you, but you didn't want to listen." And the box moves backwards because it almost had his like the box is bulletproof, and it's made out of like, I guess, I don't know, indestructible glass, and it's made to protect the person whoever's in there. And he's like, "If you would have trusted me, you would have put yourself in the box." And Hoffman's like, "Bye-bye." And Hoffman gets taken away as the room. It's like the, you know, in New Hope where the walls in the trash compactor start closing in. Strom's in the room, and he's like, "Oh shit. Like, I'm about to go. I'm gonna be turned into a fucking like, Strom sandwich." No. And he's like trying to scramble to the ceiling, but there's no escape. And he's like, "No!" And Hoffman just like smiles as he's being taken away. He's like, "Yes, I killed the only guy who was onto me." And it's revealed through the flashbacks that Jigsaw set this all up in motion, not Hoffman, John Kramer, because he wants to give Hoffman anonymity. He wants Hoffman to walk away of all of this, wipe his hands clean, and live a normal life after all of this has been carried out. He wants Hoffman to leave this all behind now, kind of ish, I think. And so the whole point of this movie is to give Hoffman anonymity. So the only person who was onto Hoffman dies. And man, is it one of my favorite kills in this. Strom is squished, and you see it in such brutal detail. Like, bones are like cracking and shit. And then the walls open up again. You see him like, it's so disgusting. It's just this flattened glob of a body. And it's gnarly.
No body shame here.
Yeah, no body shaming, sorry. And so as I mentioned, plot D, now that I think about it, not as important to the series, but it's this group of 4 people that Jigsaw was testing, the Hoffman had set up. And it's these people who don't recognize the privilege they have. Someone's rich, someone was born into this family, someone has this privilege over some other people who don't. And the whole point is that they each are kind of selfish because they only think about themselves, but they're supposed to work as a team and make sure that the other doesn't die, because at the end, the final trap has to involve all of them, or they're all doomed. Spoilers: they don't they don't understand the point of the series, and so they each end up killing each other because they're like survival of the fittest instead of helping each other. Is like as a group they need to survive. So at the end, it's only 2 of them, and they realize they're screwed, and they like die, I think, because they didn't survive, and they realize, oh, we were supposed to work together from the beginning. And so they die. Not integral to the plot, but that's the plot. So Saw 6. This is a lot of people's favorite. Well, one of their favorites. Saw 1, 2, and 6 are considered like the best. Saw 6 rolls up, And it starts with Hoffman being carried away by the glass box, and the glass box opens up, and he walks in. He's like, "Well, another day at the work. I'm free."
Another
And
day, another body.
yeah, and so Hoffman walks away, and he has anonymity. No one knew he was involved. He survived all this ordeal. He's good to go. And to me, this is where the series, in my head, kind of ends. Saw 6, because it is amazing, and it ends should have ended on this high note. The films afterwards are like, So Saw 6. Remember the recording from Saw 4. Hoffman, even though you've gone through all this, you will be tested eventually. And this is where everything that has ever happened gets paid off. And this is quite kind of why it's like regarded as like one of the best films in the series. Because eventually it's like it all comes together. It's like this is in this amazing movie. Perez, Agent Perez, who I said was hospitalized because this thing blew up in her face, she survives. And I think she was left like Strom's notes or something, or somehow her and the other agent, I don't remember how, but they end up piecing together that Hoffman may be it. And Hoffman's like, "Fuck, I killed Strom," and they realize that Strom was the only one who was assuming Hoffman. And they're like, "We still have yet to uncover that person who was working in the police department as the third Jigsaw killer, if there was one." Hoffman said there wasn't one, but we believe that there is one. And so this movie does tension really well. And that's plot A. Plot A. Plot B is this guy who works at an insurance company. You might remember I mentioned healthcare earlier in the beginning of this episode. Flashback, another flashback. Jigsaw, when he went to his healthcare provider's insurance, the guy who works at the insurance company, the guy who's the boss, he's John Kramer's like one of his good buddies, and he was like, "Hey man, like I've been diagnosed with cancer, and I need this amount of money. You know how I've been good with my insurance, and I haven't had any need for medicine or medical like things or whatnot. Like my insurance coverage should be good." And this guy, he manipulates the system in a dirty and crooked way. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but the insurance can't cover you at the moment because of this and this." And Kramer's like,
Which is probably
"What do
one
you
of the
mean?"
most realistic aspects of any
It
zombie
is,
movie.
dude. It is. It's like wow, like people actually out there are like this, and it's done really well. And it's like I'm sorry, man. Like I would love to. And Jigsaw's like, "I've been paying you like this months, and so I can eventually get coverage. This is the one time I need it. Please, I need my treatment for cancer." And he's like, "I'm sorry." And he's like, "You're basically giving me a death sentence because you don't want to lose money." And
He's like,
it's
yeah.
like it's how the formula works. And the way the formula works is the healthcare insurance provider, whatever, he has this group of 6 people. And I think I call them the elite because that's what I guess they are. And they review people's profiles and people's files, and they try to find little nitpicks in there and little loopholes in order to make sure that they're not provided with the money, and as to ensure less of a waste of money, even though their whole point of the company is to provide people with insurance. And so one of the examples that's given is there's a guy who needs heart surgery, and he needs some sort of treatment for his heart. And the insurance provider comes in, he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but we can't do that for you." And he's like, "What do you mean? My health has been fine until this moment. Like I need this." And he's like, "Yeah, but you have had a dental surgery done not that long ago, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." "Well, there's a risk that that surgery might go wrong, or something might be wrong with it. We have yet to see. We have to wait. But the time he's getting him to wait is the wait time that he's given to live." So he's like, "Well, I'm supposed to wait till I die?" So we have to wait to see if any infection arises because of that dental issue, because it's known that gum disease can lead to heart failure and heart disease, and you don't want to
Like the
risk it.
most
And you're
batshit
prone.
thing.
It's this like little. They make mountains out of molehills, and it's like this little like. He's like, "Are you kidding me? Like I need this coverage," and I'm only saying that because it's also integral to the plot. Um, and it seems like that, and it's these 6 people that are pointing out these little flaws that would normally seem like irrelevant, but they're used against each of these victims and these people who need it. And I'm only mentioning those 6 because they're brought up. And so 2/3 of the people who end up covered under the insurance aren't given the proper medical treatment. So 2/3, that's something that's kind of important in the film. Um, and so John Kramer's like, "You're giving me a death sentence." And that's actually the reason why Jigsaw went on his on his crazy drive, and that's why he crashed, because he was like, I'm not being given this chances. These people don't appreciate others' lives, and you best believe that guy ain't going away untested. And so that's where Saw 6 opens up. And this guy, he's like stuck to his contraptions. And every person that he's being, it's kind of like Saw 3, where he's not being tested directly, but he's being involved in the testing of others. Well, kind of like how Terry had to walk through the people, like this lady being frozen and this judge being drowned in pig sludge and the guy being twisted by his limbs. That's kind of what it is. But the insurance provider has the option to save them or not, or save certain people. So the first instance, he comes across, and this is one where I'm like, oh, this is a hard. All of these are hard decisions, and this is one of the hardest movies to watch. Not in terms of gore, although that is amazing in some. This is some of the best gore, but it's decisions that are made in this film are like amazing. He's set up in these scenarios that make him reflect on all of his life's decisions. For instance, there's these two people that uh, are put up on this pedestal, kind of. There's this old lady. They're both, all the people that are involved are employees of his, because they're all in on this. There's this old lady. She's like a secretary, and she has, her family is prone to being her family is prone to having diabetes in their blood and whatever. And she's older in age and she has some health issues. While the other is this young guy, no history of ever having any diseases in his family or whatever. Difference though is, and he has to choose which one lives, the old lady or the guy. But the thing is, the old lady has a family that will miss her. She has relatives. She has, I think, kids, and she has sisters and siblings. But the young guy has no one in life. He doesn't have family. He's a loner. He, and so Jigsaw's like make your option according uh to your system. The old lady should die because she's more prone to having diseases, whereas this guy has, according to you, has a lot to give to society where she doesn't. But the thing is, one of these will be missed while the other won't. Make your choice. He kind of sees the error of his ways, but he has to survive. He has to choose one or they both die. And he feels bad, so he admits the old lady survived. And he's like, my system's wrong. I've seen it now. She lives. And the young guy
Kind of
dies.
learns
And
his
he's like,
lesson a little bit.
yeah. And Jigsaw's like, we're not done yet. You have to, this will be ingrained in your mind and you will forever remember this, so you never do anything again. So Jigsaw's like, continue on your path. And this is happening. This is plot point. This is plot B. Keep in mind. And one of my favorite scenes, and there's a lot of people's favorite trap of this movie, is the carousel. And as his elite, the group of elite 6 members, they're on this carousel and they're being, they're spinning around in a circle, and there's this shotgun in front of them, and the shotgun stops at every single one of them, and the guy only has 2 people he can save. All the other 4 have to die because that's 2/3 of the people he will be responsible for killing. The whole 2/3 motif comes back. So only you choose which 2 survive. And so the carousel stops at one person, and the shotgun like goes down, and the guy's like, please, like I'm the reason why the company has saved a lot of money. Like I'm the one. Please, I'm like your number one employee. Like I because of us, because of me, you're rich. And the guy looks and he's like crying, just like man, I'm such a dick. And then he's like, that's not enough reason, and so the guy dies. Someone's like, I have a kid, and the one's like, I'm pregnant. And the other's like, no, you're not. Shut up. They all start screeching. And this is this hard scenario where he's like, well, who do I choose? And so he eventually saves 2 people, and he saves 2 people, right? And then everyone's dead except for one guy, and this guy knows he cannot be saved because 2 people have already been saved. And it's this heart-wrenching sequence, not because of the gore again, but because of like the emotion that's, and like the care that's put into the movie. And then the gun goes down. He's like, please, at least look at me as you kill me. And he's like, and the guy looks up and he's like, I'm so sorry. And he's like, because like, look at you, this is all your fault. And the guy dies, and the guy's like, and both the 2 chicks are like, thank you for saving us. And the guy's just crying, and he's like, I'm such a dick, what have I done?
In
And so
fucking tears.
yeah, and then so,
At least
and
he's
there's this,
learning his lesson. Not that it
yeah,
matters.
well, yeah, and it won't matter at the end of the film. But he's one of the few people who like, damn, he actually learned. Unlike all the other films where these jackasses don't learn jack shit. But in another room, simultaneously while this is happening, there's this husband. No, there's this wife and her son, and her son is. A lot of people make memes of this. Her son is the guy who plays Roderick in the original Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies. Um, but they're in this room and they're looking at the screens and they're like, "Oh, like why are we here?" And they're like, "Oh, it's because of father. We're here because of dad." And so you're like, "Oh, like are they being punished because their dad messed up all these people's lives?" The guy walks into the room, and there was this a reporter who was following up on Jigsaw, but I didn't mention her because she's not really important. But she's in the room, and the guy steps in to it's like the room's split up into 3 cages, and he goes into one of the middle cage, and he's like, after the twist is revealed, he's not their father. The reason why they mention, "Oh, we're here probably because of your father," is because the guy at the beginning who was screwed over by the dental thing, that was the dad, and they're like, "You asshole, you're the reason why our dad was killed. And the reason why we're here is because of our father, and you're the reason why he died. Why are we in this situation? What did you do? Why are we here?" And the guy's like, I learned my lesson. Like, I'm sorry. And there's this lever and there's this vat of acid, and it's made to set up so that even though he's learned his lesson, ultimately the fate of his own life is not in his hands. Just as the fate of all of his victims were in their own hands, they were in his hands. Now it's time for his fate to be in the hands of someone else. And it's given to the wife and the kid. And they're like, "You have time. You have a choice to avenge your father. And I'm sorry for putting you two in this situation. You will be in no harm, but this will be your chance to avenge him. Will you pull the lever?" And they don't know what's going to happen. Will you do it though? Will you set this man free? And the mother grabs the lever, and it's this tense scene where I'm like, "Damn, this is amazing." She grabs the lever and she's like, "Because of you, we lost our like the guy who supported our family. We struggled in life now because of that. You single-handedly ruined our family. But I'm not a monster like you. I will not stoop to your level. I will not do what you would have done." And she doesn't pull the lever, and you're like, "Oh, that's a good character development." And then Roderick steps forward and he's like, "Yeah, but I'm not that." And he pulls the lever down, and this is the best trap. People say the carousel trap is pretty sick. I admit it's good for the gut wrenching emotion, but this next trap is gnarly. This like thing of needles comes down and it injects into the guy, the healthcare guy, and it's pumping his body full of acid. He's like, "No, please, I learned my lesson." And they're like, "It's too late. You learned your lesson too late." And you see his body like dissolve and melt, and it's so gnarly, but it's done using practical effects, and it's so amazing, dude. He's like clinging onto the cage, so half of his body is like strung up, but the other half is like melting, and it's like his body's like stretching and shit. And it's like, oh, that's amazing. That is amazing, and it's chef's kiss again. That's plot B. I explained all of plot B. Plot B, plot A. Hoffman. We can't forget Hoffman. Hoffman. He's being chased by Agent Strom, and not Agent Strom. Sorry, Strom's dead. Strom died in movie 5, but Agent Perez and her partner, and they get the tape. The tape from the beginning of part 5, because you remember Hoffman, that one guy that he killed, that he hadn't teamed up with Jigsaw yet, the guy that was cut in half. They're using that tape because they realized that trap was not like Jigsaw's. It wasn't using his MO. It was nothing like Jigsaw's. Because remember, this was before he teamed up with Jigsaw. So they're like, if we use the recording for that trap, we'll find out who did the voice, who's behind the voice of that, and we'll find out who this new Jigsaw killer is. And it's this tense sequence. Both plots are like, dude, these could be their own movies, but it's amazing. And so they're like, "Hey, Hoffman, come with us." And I don't know if they know that it's Hoffman, but they're like, "Hoffman, let's go. Let's go to the lab, and we'll uncover who the new Jigsaw killer is." And so the three of them go, and Hoffman. There's this tense sequence where you see him like fiddling with himself, and he's like, "Are they gonna find out? What if I'm discovered? Like, what do I do?" The whole point of part 5 was so I would gain anonymity. They eventually get to the lab, and they're playing the tape, and there's this lady who's playing the tape, and she works with the police, and they're rewinding the tape, and they're like pulling away layers that were given to the audio so they can cover the raw footage of who this guy is. And every time they play it back, the recording says, "I bet you're feeling hopeless now," or something like that. I'm pretty sure it's that, but they keep repeating it, and it's like Hoffman telling himself, "I bet you're feeling pretty hopeless now." And Hoffman's like just walking around, pacing nervously, like, "Oh, shit, what if they uncover it? What if they uncover it?" And it's pretty sick because then Agent Perez and the other agent, like, how did you survive the events? Like, Strom wasn't meant to survive, but he survived. But, he left with wounds and this hole in his throat. But you left unscathed. Like, how did you survive? And they start questioning him, and the audio's being played like, I bet you're feeling helpless now. And it's amazing. And then they eventually get to it, and you hear Hoffman's voice. I bet you're feeling pretty helpless now. And then Hoffman just goes all fucking. He goes on a murderous rampage, and he kills all three of them. He like pulls out a gun. He like shoots one of them in the head. He electrocutes one of them or something. He spills something on one of them, whatever. He lights the whole place on fire, and he walks away. And he's like, shit. I've been uncovered. And I killed these three, so maybe they don't know, but the audio still exists. Like, will I be exposed to the world? And it's like, oh my god. And at this point, I love Hoffman. I've gained an appreciation for Hoffman. By the way, it's Jill Tuck, the Jigsaw's wife. Remember how I mentioned she's important later on? She's important now. She is revealed that she helped Jigsaw set up one of her earliest traps for Amanda, and Hoffman stepped up and helped him. And there was a point in which they kind of split. But Jill Tuck is familiar with these traps. And Hoffman, as he's realized he's been revealed, he's like, well, let me go see how my last trap has been set. And that's where he goes to the insurance provider, and he sees him melting in half, and he's like, okay, everything's going according to plan. And Jill arrives, and Jill knocks him out with like some tranquilizer or whatever. And Hoffman wakes up, and Jill plays the tape of Jigsaw, and Jigsaw's repeating the thing that was said in part 4. He's like, even though you set everything in motion and you were all this and all that, I knew that from the beginning. And it repeats the same thing from part 4. You still had yet to be tested. Now is your time to be tested. And the reverse bear trap is put on his head, and you're like, oh shit. And in part 1, there's like a certain thing where she had to get the key and unlock it. They're like, there is no key for this. This is your ultimate trap. This is where all the Jigsaw traps end. There will be no more. This is why it's like, this could be the last film. This is where it all ends. And Jill walks away, and she's like, bye, Hoffman. And she leaves, and Hoffman's like, shit. And the time's ticking, and the bear traps, like, you see him, like, the way the editing is done, the editing in Saw is pretty crazy at times, but it's like zooming in on the trap. It's like, oh, he's gonna die. Hoffman's pretty smart though. He ain't no buffoon. So he goes up to the door, which has these bars, and he puts the trap, the mouthpiece that goes between his mouth, he puts it in between, so when it eventually goes off, instead of going all the way and splitting his head open, it only goes like halfway, because it's stuck between the bars, and because it's now open somewhat, he like slides his mouth out of it, but his mouth has been ripped open, so he looks like the Joker, Heath Ledger's Joker, where it's like, how did you get these scars? And so Hoffman slides out, and Hoffman falls to his knees. He falls to his knees as he's screaming, as his mouth's been torn open. He's like screaming at the top of his lungs, and it's dramatic. And it ends, and I'm like, that's amazing. And I'm like, does he stop being Jigsaw? Does it end? This should end. But unfortunately, we get to the much maligned Saw 7, or Saw 3D, or Saw the Final Chapter. Spoilers. Although it was meant to be the final chapter, I think Saw 6 should have been the perfect final chapter. This is one of those scenarios where, unlike Friday the 13th, where they call certain films the final chapter, the final Friday, even though clearly they knew they were going to make further films, this, I feel, truly was the final chapter. And even though you can now say, well, it's not, it kind of is, because the next film wouldn't come out till like a decade later, I think. So this is like, I could see this as like maybe the final first piece of the saga, even though I think it should have ended with part 6, because part 7 sucks. And you can tell they put all of their efforts into making the film 3D. And man, this film suck in terms of story, everything. The blood looks cheap. The blood looks pink instead of red. Saw always had like a cheap look to it, but this film looks cheaper than the first when they had no budget. This shit looks just disgusting, dude. And not disgusting in a gnarly way, just like, damn. They could have ended the franchise on a good note. But yeah, if you ever see a ranking of Saw series, Saw 7 is always the last one. And it's like, this is the only film that sucks. All the others don't suck. They're varying degrees of quality, but this one just absolutely is utter dog shit. Saw 7, Jill Tuck, she's on the run from Hoffman. And Hoffman, this basically becomes a slasher. All subtlety and all intelligence that had been seen throughout the films is thrown away. Hoffman becomes essentially a Michael Myers type, where he's impervious to wounds. You can cut him, but he still keeps on walking, and it's like, what is he, the T-800 or whatever? And I see a lot of jokes referencing him to that.
T800.
He basically becomes Jason Voorhees, and he's like hunting down Jill Tuck, and Jill Tuck is like running away, and it's this cat and mouse game. And one of my this one just sucks. I'm not gonna go into too much depth in this one, but basically, there's this guy who wrote a
Especially
book
because we're
on
2 hours
Jigsaw.
in.
No, geez, I'm honestly gonna have fun editing this. There's this guy who wrote a book about his survival of him surviving a jigsaw trap, but it revealed that he was just that's false. He was never trapped. He was never put in a scenario. He's just banking money off of these victims' cases, and so he made a profit. Jigsaw noticed. He's putting him in a trap. That's all you need to know. Hoffman's character is destroyed in this film. Everything that I liked and the mystique of him and the intricacies of him is this film destroys his character. This film destroys Jill Tuck's character. It destroys Jigsaw. And then it's shown. Remember Dr. Gordon from the first film when he cut off his leg and he slithered away? He is the new Jigsaw. And that he worked with the Jigsaw after Saw 1 on numerous traps. And that's why a lot of these traps have like medical things to do with them, because he was a doctor and he helped them. And I'm like, this is the laziest shit ever. Just to bring him back for the last chapter. And he's like, hello, Hoffman. Like, I'm the new Jigsaw. And why is he the new killer? That doesn't make any goddamn sense. Why does any of this film exist? And the film ends with Hoffman putting the reverse bear trap on Jill. And this is the first time we see the trap actually do its effect. And I kind of felt bad because I liked Jill Tuck's character, because she's just the wife of Jigsaw who was wrapped in all this. She didn't mean to be like the others, and she isn't like the others, but she was killed anyways. And I'm gonna admit the way the trap splits her face open is pretty sick. But it's filled with 3D effects, so like the blood and guts go to the screen, and it's like, oh, that looks stupid. Also, the film opens up with one of my least favorite traps. This film is like a Final Destination movie, where it's just stupid. The Final Destination movies, I give a pass. I love that series. It's stupid fun, but this doesn't fit for a Saw series. It's like the writers of that series came over and was like, let's do a Saw series, and it's stupid. There's a scenario where there's a trap that takes place in public. Now, most of these have taken place in warehouses and barns and discrete locations so people don't stumble upon them. But there's this trap that takes place in like, like certain shops will have like displays of like mannequins and shit. That takes place in one of those, and there's these 3 guys attached, and the dialogue's so bad. It's again reminiscent of a Friday the
Everything is
13th movie.
bad.
It sucks. But I saw the final chapter, and it was truly meant, I feel, to be the final chapter. And this is where I lost all momentum. If I ever do another binge watch of the series, I'll stop at part 6. I will stop at part 6. I won't continue on. Saw 7 sucks. I'm not gonna go on a rant to Saw 7 because this episode's already long enough. And this is where the series died, both because it sucked and because it was intended to be the last chapter. And
This
I think
episode is probably gonna be longer than
most.
some of the movies in the series.
Oh yeah. And then there was a hiatus on the series because it was meant to be the end. But then we pick up almost a decade later with Jigsaw. And this is a stark contrast to Saw 7. Saw 7 is cheap. It looks in terms of quality and everything, the acting. Jigsaw is this glossy, modern film. Billy has like robotics in
Which
him. His
is
eyes glow. There's
which is really
cameras and
ironic,
sleek.
considering what it is.
Yeah. Jigsaw is, and it's not bad, but Jigsaw is a film that, why does it exist? Because at this point, okay, we have Jigsaw. We have his apprentice Amanda, then Hoffman. I can deal with that. I can also deal with Jill Tuck because, she was kind of just brought into this world. I hate Dr. Gordon as the 5th Jigsaw. In this film, this one's kind of throwaway because but because it stands on its own, it's just whatever. You can skip it, especially considering the new potential that Spiral is bringing to the franchise. But Jigsaw there's new cases coming up. It's reminiscent of Jigsaw. It's made to seem like Jigsaw is the killer, but instead it's the coroner. His name's Logan, and there's a pretty cool twist where it's revealed that it's him. And again, kind of like because it's more modern than the others and it's more sleek, they use like lasers and shit, so it's much more like high tech, and that's where the ending kill is from like the guy's gets his head split open like a demogorgon um through lasers and stuff. And it's pretty cool, but yeah. And that guy is revealed to have known Jigsaw since the beginning. A sixth Jigsaw named Logan, whatever's. But at the okay, and then this is where we get to Spiral. And Spiral, haven't seen it as of yet recording, but a couple predictions. At the end of Saw 7, Dr. Gordon was accompanied by other people who wore pig masks. And pig masks is Jigsaw's like Michael Myers, kind of how he wears that white mask and a boiler. Jigsaw's getup is black robes, black or red robes, and a pig mask. And there's this group of people who have pig masks, and it's like, oh, is there a group of Jigsaws? Kind of like how in Scream there's multiple ghost faces. Is there like a cult of Jigsaws? And so one thing that I think they could do, because I think they're planning, and one of my friends told me this yesterday, I think they're planning on doing an anthology series where each film is a different scenario, especially because I guess the Saw series, the way they see it, is like as a book where Saw is the main event, and each Saw movie is a chapter. You know, that's why Part 7 is the last chapter. Um, Spiral is called Spiral from the Book of Saw. So it's like, oh, here's a little spin-off from the main book of Saw. So I think that's pretty sick. So it's a spin-off. It's its own thing. That's why Billy the Puppet isn't in the film. Instead, it's a pig-looking thing. Jigsaw, it's not the famous John Kramer voice we know. It's a distorted, different voice, and it's like, oh, this is unique. It's all different. It's all maybe it's even in a different city. And my theory is, over the course of all the Jigsaws that have been set up, there's a cult that's arisen, and they're looking, and especially because in Jigsaw they state, oh, there's this website set up to Jigsaw, and they're auctioning off because one of the main characters has a lot of Jigsaw's traps, and it was fun pointing out like that's from part 4, that's from part 5, that's from part 2, that's from part 1, that's the reverse bear, blah, 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 reverse bear trap, and there's the little water thing that Strauma's in. So I predict there's a cult of Jigsaws out there in the world, and they're spreading their influence. Because in the end of part 6, the reason why Logan is Jigsaw is because he noticed that in his police department, the police are corrupt, and they're not doing their job that they should be by, providing justice to the people who deserve it. And he's like, I will be doing that, and I'll start by attacking the cops, killing off the dirty ones, and then going to the thieves, murderers, rapists, and all that. And that's what he's doing. And he says, the way the movie ends, most of the movies end with him saying, game over. He says, I speak for the dead. I speak for those who never had their justice served to them. And this is pretty sick. So this is an anthology series. So each film from the Book of Saw afterwards, Spiral, and who knows whatever else comes out, is a different Jigsaw in a different city. So they keep doing the who done it, and instead of going back and doing convoluted flashbacks and all this, new people, you no longer have to flashback to John Kramer. You no longer have to tie it into the other films. They're their own standalone stories that can work. And that's where I think Spiral with the Jigsaw Killer has been influenced, the new Jigsaw Killer, by the events of the first 7 films. And that because they've greenlit the film after Spiral, I believe. And I think it's called Saw X or something like that. They've already greenlit the 10th movie. So after Spiral,
Why?
we will get another.
Why?
I
And for some reason,
want it.
Spiral has Chris Rock and Samuel
Oh,
L. Jackson.
not for some reason. It turns out Chris Rock is a fan of the series, and he's the one who came to them with the idea of Spiral. Yeah, it
Well,
wasn't the company.
just a warning, it already has not great reviews.
Oh damn.
Well, I mean, critics hate it, but the audiences
Yeah.
love it. So
Yeah, that's true. A lot of the Saw movies people hate it. I'll see. I have yet to see. I will see. I can do my spoiler review one day in a couple days once it eventually comes out. Because I will watch it. You'll guarantee I'll watch it. But yeah, Chris Rock went to them with the ideas like, I love Saw. Do this. He's clearly enamored with it, and he wants the series to move forward because clearly everything's different. He's not using the elements that we know, and it's like different series, different Jigsaw, different anthology sequences we could do. Yes, even if the film sucks, which I didn't think about. Damn, this might suck. I welcome other Saw films because they no longer have to ruin the first 6 films. You know what I mean? They no longer have to tie back. They can be their own things now. It's Cult of Jiggies. Uh,
How dare you?
I'm excited. I would. That's amazing. Doing their own brand of justice. That's amazing. Um, do you have any further interest in the Saw series or?
I watch the movies. I'm not. I watch the movies. They're fun to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, they get
I've
fun to
never
watch.
been. I'm not. I'm ironically enough. I'm not that into the Saw movies or horror movies as a whole. I'm just kind of along for the ride.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I do. I do love the more physical aspect though. Going to like haunted houses or going to Universal, which we will be going this year, and
Yes.
hopefully we have secret plans to maybe record it.
Oh yeah, because we didn't do that. Well, we weren't doing the podcast. What 2019? So we didn't.
We
Yeah,
were planning on
I
doing it,
I
but then
recorded
COVID
some
happened.
sequences because I have something from Killer Clowns, but it's like a 5-minute clip. But we could include whatever our thoughts of the 2019 maze were because we could record ourselves at the event and then we could do a podcast episode
My
where
tooth
we
just cracked.
whoa, that's not good. You could even rank all the mazes, like which mazes do you think are our favorite, and we
Yeah.
could loop in the 2019 mazes as well, and because we haven't done an episode on that, and then yeah, but yeah, I like experiencing horror as well. Horror movies is like the closest experience. It's the closest you can get to like going through a horror experience, like Halloween Horror Nights would provide. Not that I would
Yeah.
love to go through a traumatic experience like anyone in a Saw series or Paranormal Activity movie, but
Yeah, no,
that's the
I
closest
think
I
I'm
would like to
good.
get. Yeah. But yeah, we have some things planned. Going to certain locations. I'm looking forward to Saw. More Saw, the better. I want Saw slowly catching up to like Friday the 13th and Halloween. 10 films that they 9 for sure. 10 they're doing. That's amazing. Bring me more. Feed me Saw. If at the end of this episode I realize I probably sound like I have no energy because I just spent almost 2 hours discussing the Saw
No,
series.
no, 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 no. Not almost 2 hours. Over 2 hours. Two
So
hours, 7 minutes, and 40 seconds to be exact at this point.
this isn't like a Friday the 13th where I could, because our Friday the 13th episode, it was like what 30 minutes or so, maybe an hour. I remember that being short because it's easy to explain. Where the first one, the mother's the killer. Second, Jason's first appearance, but he doesn't have the mask yet. He has a sack hit. Third film, it's in 3D. He gets the hockey mask. Fourth film, he dies. Fifth film, it's an imposter. Sixth film, he comes back to life. Seventh film, he fights Carrie. So on and so on and so on. This film, you can't quite do that. The series, you just can't quite do that. It's convoluted. That's kind of why I like it, and it's the only series that I appreciate for that. It's like a TV show. The first 6 films are like a season. It's like a drama. You get the pilot and you end at the season finale, and then Saw 7 ruins it. But I was invested and I want to be invested again. So yeah, that doesn't my. We will do an official Saw episode one day on the main Salem Station podcast episode. Won't be for a while though because I really like the first film. But yeah, that's everything I have on the Saw series. I might eventually rank all these films in a different episode and even rank the Jigsaw killers of the favorite traps. Part 1, reverse bear trap. Part 2, the needle pit. Part 3, either the rack or the thing with the rib cage. Part 4, the ice contraption. Part 5, the Strom thing with the one that had Strom in the middle of the closing walls. That was pretty sick. Part 7, oh sorry, part 6, the carousel or the needles full of acid. Part 7, I got nothing. Part 8, the laser death at the end. Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening to this extended episode that I knew this was going to be a long episode from the beginning because there's no way I was going to be able to explain this bluntly. But yeah, I have hopefully it came off as me sounding passionate about it and not just rambling. Shit, yeah.
But this he's been talking about this nonstop ever since the movie's been announced. But
Yeah, I've been hyped. I've been hyping this up. I watched them all in order to get to this, and This is my
Depending
end.
on, I mean, depending on what happens, there may be a 5 minute, or it's either gonna be 5 minutes or an hour. There's no in between about his thoughts on the movie, whether it is terrible or whether it is great.
Yeah,
We shall see.
it can either be a praise or it'll be a rant. Okay, yeah. Before I go further down this spiral of a series. No, sorry. Let me do that better. I wanted to include a fun in there before I spiral. I can't do it. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode of the Witching Hour. We'll do more of the Witching Hour. We did one for Friday and Halloween. We will eventually
Yep.
do it for George Romero zombie series.
Yes.
won't do it for that. It's just, but yeah. Thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Witching Hour. I'm your co-host Robert,
And I'm Alex.
and see y'all on. I can't say the Witching Hour. This is the Witching Hour. See y'all on the main Salem station. See you aboard the station. Oh, see you for the Salem station. Just end it. Just end it.